In this video, we're talking about warp string, the 3 that I use and how I decide which one to use. So let's get started. If you're new here, hello, I'm Janelle, and on this channel, I teach frame loom weaving. Specifically, I weave on looms that do not have adjustable tension, so if you do other types of weaving, such as floor loom weaving, you might not find this video very applicable to you. Laid out in front of me, I have the 3 sizes of warp string that I use. From left to right, we have 4/8 cotton, also known as 8/4 cotton, they're the same thing, 4/12 linen or 12/4 linen, and 8/8 cotton. 8/8 cotton is the thickest, 4/8 cotton is exactly half as thick as 8/8 cotton, and 4/12 linen is a little bit thicker than the 4/8 cotton. These warp strings have a totally different sizing system than yarn, where usually on the label you can find a weight such as medium weight or super bulky weight, and they're also different than macrame string and cord, where you're gonna find the measurement of 3mm, 5mm, 7mm, and so on. For our 4/8 cotton string, we have 4 plies of number 8 cotton string, and the 8/8 cotton is made up of 8 plies of number 8 cotton string. The linen is 4 plies of number 12 linen string. Even though a number 8 string should be thicker than a number 12 string, the 4/12 linen is actually a bit thicker than the 4/8 cotton, you know, just to make things a bit confusing. From the little bit of research I did, I learned the reason for this is because back in the day, the cotton and linen factories were off creating their own sizing systems separate from each other, and no one ever came along to create one solid sizing standard across all different types of fiber. So while these 2 types of cotton are the same, they're just different thicknesses, the linen does feel significantly different. For a linen string, it's gonna feel a little bit more textured, so it's a bit more rough and not as smooth as the cotton. And it is a more rigid string as well. So it's gonna be super, super strong and not as flexible as the cotton. One of the main reasons I like all 3 of these warp strings is that they're not stretchy. And I mean, pretty much any string is gonna have some give to it, but when you're working on a loom where you can't adjust the warp tension, working with something that doesn't have a lot of give is ideal. So to put in perspective a little bit further the different sizes of these strings, we're gonna lay out a few more things. So we have our thin cotton, our linen, our thick cotton, and then next to this, I'm gonna lay some medium weight cotton just to show you the size difference. So this is a medium weight dishcloth yarn, and I do use it in weaving a lot, just not usually for the warp. I know it's hard to see on video, but this one is definitely thicker than the 8/8 cotton, not by a lot, but it is a little bit thicker. I have used this dishcloth cotton as a warp in the past, but it's not my favorite because it does have more give to it and it tends to stretch out the more that you weave on it. So it's not my favorite, but if you're brand new to weaving and you're looking for a super economical way to get started, this is a pretty good option. Now we're gonna move on to some examples of where I used each of these strings and why. First up, we have a bunch of mug rugs and bookmarks. I love using 8/8 cotton for projects like these where I want to use the warp string as the fringe. Because on a mug rug and a bookmark, I don't really want to add all the extra bulk of an additional fringe, so it's really nice to be able to use the warp string as the fringe. Another place I tend to use 8/8 cotton warp string is for twills and overshot. So here's an example of a twill, and here's an example of an overshot project. So I like using that 8/8 cotton because I need that fuller string for the background weaving portion of an overshot pattern. It also gives us a really nice full look on the top if that's something that you want. Next up, I have some examples of using 4/12 linen. So first up, we have this cute little fall porch weaving, and this is the 4/12 linen. So in a piece like this, I could have used any of the 3 warp strings and it totally would have worked. But there was a few thoughts I had in a piece like this. One, I wanted to hang it from a branch, and I love the more natural, subtle color of the linen against the branch. And I also love the way that that natural linen color is peeking through the weft and isn't as stark as something like an off-white. Specifically on pieces where you're not seeing the warp at all, it really doesn't matter which of the three you choose because you're not seeing it. So for this one, I would have been more thinking about the top of the piece. How do I want the top to look since I knew I was gonna hang it from the loops? And again, I liked the more subtle color of the natural linen for the top of this one. That being said, the off-white in either 8/8 or 4/8 cotton would have totally worked for this piece as well. In this piece, I again opted for the 412 linen. And just like the previous 412 linen example, I used this because I wanted something a bit more subtle and natural looking and not as stark as the off-white. So really, sometimes it's literally just a color preference. In this piece, I used the 4/8 cotton, which is the thinner cotton. And the reason I chose that for this one is because I wanted the warp string to be inconspicuous. So I knew I was using this white and it disappears nicely there. And even though this green and white do contrast, it does kind of disappear into the background. And I like how the white warp string up here ties in with the white that I used in the piece. But again, I could have used any of the warp strings and had it looked good, other than maybe something like black. In this piece, you're seeing a lot of the warp string, and yet again, I wanted something that wasn't super stark white, but you could still see it, so the natural linen color was a perfect choice. Similar to the mug rugs and bookmarks, in this piece I chose 8/8 cotton because I wanted to use the warp string as a fringe and I didn't want that fringe to look sparse, so 8/8 cotton was a great choice for this one. This is another example of the 4/8 cotton. For this one, I wanted the warp string to not be super visible, so the fact that it's thinner means that it's disappearing into the weaving nicely. And I also wanted the lighter color at the top here just to tie in with the other white that I had throughout the piece, but I didn't want it to be super noticeable at the top, so the thinner cotton over the thicker one was the better choice. This is another one where I opted for the thinner 4/8 cotton, and I think this was the perfect choice for this piece because I was using a lot of off-white, so the warp string isn't super visible and it really lets the other elements of the piece shine through, and it doesn't give us anything super bulky on the dowel at the top. For this piece, I opted for the 412 linen again. I absolutely love the linen. It just gives a really natural and sort of subtle color in your piece. This one, obviously, we're not seeing the warp string at all throughout the piece. We're only seeing at a top, but I absolutely love the way that it looks with a stained dowel. And it, again, isn't as high contrast as the off-white against the brown. Here's a direct comparison of the thinner 4/8 cotton against the thicker 8/8 cotton, specifically at the top of the piece. You can see throughout the piece, even in these sections, it really doesn't look any different because it is the same color. However, at the top, it does look different. So with the 8/8 cotton, we have really nice full bundles of warp string at the top. And then over here, we have much thinner, more sparse looking. So for these two pieces, it is 100% a personal preference. I hope this gives you some insight on the different warp strings that I use and why I might use them. So if you want to make more pieces that are mug rugs and bookmarks, I would definitely suggest going for an 8/8 cotton, something a little bit thicker with more plies. If you plan on making organic shape pieces, the 4/8 cotton or the 412 linen are perfectly fine unless you want that thicker look at the very top of your piece. If you want to check out our warp string and the different colors that we sell them in, head over to spruceandlinen.com.